Welcome to Every Step podcast. I'm Christina Weston.
And I'm Judith Beck.
Every Step is the podcast where career and life meet.
With a new guest every episode, we explore the gutsy issues affecting everyone in the workplace.
In this episode of Every Step, we are joined by Lisa Barron, Australian fashion designer who this year celebrates 40 years in business. We chat about what it takes to have longevity in business. Welcome, Lisa. We're so excited to have you with us today, and congratulations. You're celebrating 40 years in business. That is certainly longevity in business. So that's wonderful, wonderful. When I talk to founders, and I know Judith and I have spent a lot of time chatting to would-be founders and people that are going into business, and what we're often surprised by, and we've been through this journey ourselves, what we're often surprised by is that they're unprepared for what's ahead of them, and they're not ready for it. They go into it starry-eyed. And I'd like to open up this conversation about all of us sharing what it is that we personally found challenging in the beginning and over the journey, like things that we weren't expecting. Lisa, I'll throw to you first, if that's okay.
Oh, well, as you mentioned, 40 years, it's a long time ago. So I've got to go back to those early days where, yes, I was starry-eyed as well. You know, I think leaving Perth with my $500 in sewing machine and saying to my mum, hey, mum, I'm heading over east. I'm going to be a fashion designer. You know, I really thought it was as easy as that. And in some ways it was. But I think, you know, for businesses now and looking back in reflection, there's some key questions you have to ask yourself, such as, you know, is there room in this world for this business, for this service? You know, it might be something that people don't even realize they need yet. So it's having that insight and that ability to really look at whether there is a need for this, you know, such as fax machines. I remember the first person trying to sell me a fax machine. I was like, what? I don't need that.
Why do you need that?
I've never needed that. I've been perfectly fine without it. So, but, you know, look what's happened. So I think there's having that real insight into what you're trying to deliver to the world and make a business out of.
And that's that market fit piece, isn't it? That's kind of, is there market fit? You might have the best idea and then you go and talk to people. And I was just sharing with Judith before we came on and started recording, actually, that you can have an idea and then you can go and talk to people about it. And they go, yeah. And then you need to ask them, would they invest in it or would they buy it? And unless they're prepared to put their money where their mouth is, maybe you don't have market fit.
And that's hard to work out sometimes. Sometimes you have to jump in and give it a go. But while you're doing that, I think it's important to have enough skills to cover the business. You know, if you start out employing everybody to do it, one, you don't have the oversight to see that they're doing it properly. But two, like any small business, you know, and I must preface that a lot of my reflections are basically in the industry, in the fashion industry, and so that's where it's coming from. And I suppose that's why you've asked me to come on. But, you know, I can sew, pattern make, sell, do it all. Not that I want to, but if I have to, I can. So I think it's an important
That's critical. That's critical. I think that's another misconception. I think founders who come in, or new founders who come in and are moving from corporate, for example, into a startup business, and unless they can, you know, whatever the skill is for the business, it might be, I have to write code, I have to do sales, I have to do marketing, I have to be the cook, clean and bottle wash, I have to take out the garbage.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do everything initially. Otherwise, you're right, you're throwing money out the door in other people to do it for you, and you don't have that cash flow to begin with.
No, and you don't have to be the best at it. I can make a pattern, it's not great, but I can do it and I have enough understanding of it. Same with my sewing, it's not great, but if I have to, but it gives you an understanding, so it gives you a deeper knowledge. And then I think there's the most important part is having some money sense. I get astounded at the lack of knowledge of what it takes to actually start a business, what it takes to run it, and then, you know, it's simple. You basically just need to know what goes out has to come back sooner or later. And if you can't see that happening, well, it's probably going to fail. So
Yeah.
I think
Cash flow planning, and the money never happens as fast as you think.
Yeah.
Always
Don't
takes
spend
longer.
it before you make it. Don't spend it before you make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always found that, you know, looking back in the first 3 years of running my business was the one, don't spend it before you make it. But also you have to be prepared that things aren't going to happen that fast. The business isn't going to come rolling in the door. You've got to put the more time and effort into it than, if you think you only need to do this amount of time, double it.
Triple it, quadruple it.
Exactly right, because you've got to put in all the time, one, to do all those functions that we've been talking about. You've got to do everything as the owner, and because you aren't in that position to hire staff, and you don't want to go out and start hiring people before the business comes in. So you may need to do 2 or 3 different things and do things longer. So you've got to be able to understand that it won't come in. I mean, I thought I was under that impression. I'd think I'd go in and see a client, and if I didn't get the business, I was like, but why not? What do you want if I don't get the business? And you have to keep pushing until you do. And you got to take the knockbacks. I think you've got to be able to bounce back from the knockbacks and not be
and learn from them.
Here
comes this word again, resilience. I thought I was resilient before I started the various businesses that I've been involved with. I had no idea what resilience really, really meant. And it is that journey. I mean, Lisa, you've been through so many cycles, so many industry cycles. How have you built up your resilience? Because it takes grit to do what you've done.
Absolutely. And I think it does, reflecting on some of the things that we were going to talk about today, the tough times. And there's been such a variety of tough times. And it's those early days and that early grounding that really sets you up well for it. Like if I look at, during COVID, that was probably one of the worst tough times that there was. But I think that we got through that from, falling back on those core values and structures such as relationships. Building great relationships in business to me is king, whether it's staff, whether it's, your clients. But during COVID, and that was the doozy of the toughest time, it was relationships that got me through that. My clients, who I basically dress women in senior roles and corporate and special occasion, both of those things were out the door.
Yeah.
So, and I really appreciate the advice from well-meaning helpers saying, go into loungewear. No, that's like asking, Guy Grossi to start making, I don't know, meat pies. But I just couldn't do that. But my clients, the relationships, they kept me going. And my team, my fantastic team. We're small, but powerful and connected and respectful and all of those things. And, I couldn't have done it without them. So, and then there was the 92 economic recession. That was pretty bad too. I was watching boutiques close down left, right and centre, owing me money. It was a terrible time. So, I think that idea of then having money sense, knowing to bring it in, keep it tight, really know what you're doing at that time, that helped during that time. But it's mindset. I was going to say the idea of a recession. I started the business in '83 in a recession. When I arrived in Melbourne, there was a recession, there were bushfires. I think Joan Kerner was premier. I knew they needed fashion. I knew Melbourne needed a fashion new brand. But, it was then that it was a little bit of naivety, but I invented this word, after I realized what a recession was and that I was a bit silly to start a business during a recession, but I invented this word called obliviousm. And it's oblivious optimism.
Brilliant.
And boy, that has set me up well, and I still use it today. Sometimes it's better not to know, but that optimism and that positivity gets you through a lot.
But you also have wisdom now, right? Because you've been through things, so you can You can have that.
Yeah.
It's married with wisdom born of experience.
Yeah, hopefully, yes. Hopefully I'm wiser now than I was in 1983. But, we made it. So,
I think that point that you made about the financial side of it, I mean, in the first 3 years, you're just trying to make money. But once you start making money and you start making, so what a lot of companies get themselves into trouble is they spend too much, right? It's just like anything, the more you make, the more you spend. But I always had that view that, once you start making money, when I got into like my 4th, 5th, and 6th year, those years, I always had a year's overhead in the bank. And I was doing recruiting, right? So we didn't have product, that type of thing, was a service. But my view was, and it was basically from my grandmother who said, save for a rainy day. My accountants would go nuts with that philosophy because they go, why are you putting this money in the bank? I go, it's a year's overhead. They go, you should be investing it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, no, that is my comfort zone.
It's called self-insurance. That's what it's called.
Yeah. And when the recession that we had to have, and when the Y2K and the GFC and all that stuff, I thank my grandmother for that many, many times, because I didn't have to make people redundant. And sometimes we had no business coming in for like 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
But if you let your people go, then when things pick up, you got to try to hire people back. It's going to cost you twice as much, and you're going to lose momentum. And I think one thing I always say to new founders coming in, if they start making a lot of money, don't spend it. Save it like you would anything, because you'll thank yourself, because there's always a dip, isn't there? There's always a dip and a downturn that's going to be, and if you panic, I never had to change my rates. I never had to lower my prices or any of that stuff because of that comfort zone. Yeah. And I think that is a big thing in any business, to really financially, a lot of people forget about it.
Yeah. And the other aspect of that too is, if you're growing, how quickly do you grow and how quickly do you add on people? Because there comes a point for some types of businesses where it becomes a negative return. You actually put on people, you have more overhead, you have more responsibility, and actually you're not making as much profit, but you're working a lot harder. Lisa, how did you manage that aspect of it and not get carried away?
I think because I've always run my own race. I mean, I've been aware of other brands and competitors, etc., but it's not something I've ever really focused on. I've just been on my own track the whole way. And I think reflecting on this 40 years of what is success, is it success just to have made it to 40 years? There would be people that would look at my brand and go, oh, that's not successful. She's only got one shop and she wholesales a little bit, and she, but to me, that is so successful. And exactly what you said, Christina, there was a time that we had 3 stores, a lot of staff, one store was carrying the other 2. And, it just was a lot more stress, a lot more work. And for me, quality of life is pretty important. So, absolutely. I think it comes down to ego as well. And, when I have noticed how other people have played out through this industry, many of them back in the 90s driving around in fantastic Porsche cars and, living an amazing lifestyle. And that's not something that, was important to me. My business was the focus. So, I could easily let go of that, but they're not here anymore. They're not even brands that were in every second page of Vogue magazine. And that wasn't my focus. I didn't need to push that way. I just wanted to keep my business solid. So, I think you just run your own race and against yourself, because you can get so caught up in trying to keep up with what everyone else is doing that it can be really damaging. And
it's a big distraction, isn't it? I find myself sometimes in my business now getting worried about what the competition's doing. And I've got to, just as you said, I have to find myself pulling myself back and going, actually, I know what we do is really good. Yeah. It's a high level of service, and I'm going to keep promoting and running my own race. But it is challenging because there's that noise and there's that little niggle in your ear, and it's like, if only you did this, if only you did that, then you'd be more successful. But you've got to pull it back, don't you?
You do. You have to have faith in yourself, know what you're doing, know what you're doing is great, because I get so many suggestions. Like, I think every second client I've got is a would-be designer telling
Frustrated
me,
designer.
why don't you do that? Why don't you have it like this? And I think, oh, okay, yep. It's really interesting. So, but you've just got to find your niche and really know it well, and know what you're delivering and who you're delivering to, and stick with it and believe in it. And
how many businesses have we seen over the years get into trouble because they tried to do too much, and they tried to diversify into it? And I had the same issue, Lisa, people saying, well, why don't you do contracting, and why don't you do junior level positions and those types? And I go, no, I'm focusing on executive search, and that's all I want to do.
Yeah.
I don't do any more than that. And I don't want to, and I didn't want to, I didn't care what the competition was doing either, because it was kind of like, I'll focus on what I need to do. I'll focus on the customer. I think that's important. If you focus on the customer, and you provide a really good level of service, you're always going to be ahead of the game. If you go that extra 10% and just do a little more, and people, I remember going into your store in Armadale, and they didn't know who I was. I just came in there, it was a couple of years ago, walking in, and the girls were so good. They were like, how are you? If you need any help, let us know. Do you just want to look? It was great. And how many times have we gone into stores where nobody even looks at you, and they're looking down on their phone or something? And when that happens, I walk out.
Yeah.
I don't want them to follow me around the store. I just want them to acknowledge that I'm a person coming into their business. And that goes for any kind of, whether it's a service business or retail or whatever, you just want customer service. And if companies, when people look at starting new businesses, if they just focus on that first, and what they can provide over and above the competition, they'll probably do all right.
How did you create that culture, Lisa? How did you create and then grow and sustain that culture of customer centricity?
I think because I've been on the floor a lot, and for me, my customers are everything. Whether I was for the first 10 years of the business, I was just wholesale, and I did the selling myself. I wanted to know who was stocking my brand. I'd created it, so I thought I was the best one to explain why, where the fabrics came from, why the shape of that dress is suitable for this kind of demographic, why the shape of that was suited for someone else. So I think I've just always been hands-on, and then any team member or staff member that's come on board have just seen that it works. So they've adopted that themselves. And my store manager now, who I think Judith Hannah, she's been with me 10 years. She's just fantastic. The customers just absolutely love her. She knows exactly, what they're needing. It's all coming from helping them. Yes, we need to make money, but, we don't want anyone buying a dress that is not going to be something that's going to be a valued part of their wardrobe. And that has to be deep, not just spoken about, not just token. That's why I don't have, 15 stores and, driving around in a Porsche even now. But, to me, the value of the business and the relationships and the rewards that have come from just genuine interactions.
Yeah, and I think that longevity in terms of clothing, where I think there's a socio kind of cycle now coming back, where people don't want the throwaway clothes. They don't want the $5 this and the $10 that. I mean, people are still buying them, but there's more people making conscious purchases around, no, I'm going to spend however many hundreds of dollars on this piece, but I know I'm going to have it for a long time, and I'm contributing to the environment, and I'm contributing to a whole bunch of other things in doing that.
Well, definitely. And I think that's something that, again, has been just an inherent part of the business, that sustainability I've always made in Melbourne. My cutting room now is next door to my shop, with glass walls. So my new store, which we moved to after COVID, is the epitome of sustainability. We make the clothes, they're in the store. women come to me and say, I bought this coat 15 years ago, and that makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Other businesses would go, I wished I used cheaper fabric, or, you know, they might say to me, I've lost the button on this coat from 10 years ago. I'll know exactly where that button is. Go and get it for them and give it to them. You know, so
okay.
for me, I love the fact, and it's been the whole way through the history of the brand, these garments last a long time. So the whole idea of fast fashion has never been a part of my ethos anyway, and I just love that people are getting value for money. I work hard for my money, so I know that, and many of the women that I dress do also. So to provide them with a, you know, a product that's going to sustain and be with them, and they feel they're getting value for money, that's why they come back. And I love that. And I do get very annoyed at fast fashion, and it's still there, and it's still there because too many people keep supporting it, and they might have a placard in one hand going, you know, hey, we've got to save the planet, but they're wearing something from Topshop. It's like, come on, you know, walk the walk.
I remember before the pandemic, I was in Sydney, and I had to go and get a wedding present. And so we were across the street from one of the large department stores. Anyway, I ran in there. They had a big sale going on, all the banners and everything else that they spent a fortune to get people into the store, but there was no one anywhere to wait on you. And so I was like going, oh my God, virtually I couldn't get any, no, that's, when you find somebody, that's so-and-so's business, and I don't know where they are. When we can't open the cases, or we can't, and I thought to myself, this is why people are prefer to go to the village shopping, go to the shops, because they get the customer service, or it pushes them online.
Yes.
They can't, you think, just hire some people to help.
Yeah.
If you're going to
the days of department stores probably are limited unless they make changes, because I hear it time and time again. And then there's the exclusivity situation too, buying from small brands and independent brands. There's so many benefits to it. And I think people are realizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know what my attitude was when I had FRG was that we would run like we were a small business with a big business attitude. In other words, we had the structures and we could do anything that anybody else did. In fact, most of our clients probably thought we were a big business, but then we could throw the extra customer service on top of that, which would then be beneficial to us because they were getting extra service. And
yeah, I think that's critical, that still having, I think you need to have that corporatization, that kind of process and business planning. And, I talk to a lot of founders in the industry that I'm working in now, which is micromobility, electric scooters, electric bikes. And these a lot of them are young people under 30, and they've got this bright idea, and you start to sit down to them and you talk to them about what costs and how much is it going to cost you to buy these devices? Oh, this much. Have you actually budgeted for insurance? Well, how much is insurance? Unfortunately, insurance in our industry is crazy, stupid expensive, no matter where you are in the world. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars of premium. Wow. And they haven't actually factored it in, and they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but they haven't actually done the basic things of understanding what their inputs are, what their costs are going to be, and running a basic spreadsheet, running their projections of what they think they might earn against what their outgoings are going to be. And they just go into it really blindly. I mean, there are some that are very, very sophisticated and it's wonderful, but too many are actually falling into I just love this idea of doing this, and I just love these scooters, and they haven't actually thought everything else through.
Yeah, that's so true. I have the parallel to that is wind cheaters and t-shirts, and I mentor a lot of fashion startups, and it's really hard when you've and I think taking it into the creative world too. All the creative ideas are unique, but it's that process, Christina, of that planning, of knowing is the market ready for it? Can you fund it? Can you produce it? So I'm very interested in the creative world and how they turn their brilliant ideas and skills into, a living for themselves, and many don't. And I think I saw a lot of this being on the Creative Victoria Advisory Board. There's so much talent out there, and yet there are examples that I just have so much respect for. And one is Roan, the street artist who, you know, has put on the most amazing shows around Victoria, you know, transforming buildings with his work and the atmosphere and the feeling. That is, to me, is one of the best examples of seeing a true creative and a true artist creating his own market, his own world. And it's just brilliant. So
that's really interesting, because I think creativity, the creative industries are actually very challenging, aren't they? They're probably more challenging because there's not as, I mean, some of them are tangible, but what are the things that you find are the most challenging for small business people that have a creative product or service?
I think sometimes, like, we talk about looking at market research, but with creatives, sometimes it's creating your niche. So you might have to go that extra step of not thinking there's a niche there for it already, but creating a niche. And that I would suggest that reaching out and finding mentors, and again, I refer to Roan. He surrounded himself with some very smart people and supporters. And like back in the olden days, in the, you know, in Paris in the 20s, you'd find yourself a patron even, you know, someone who would help you. So find that business brain, that business planner, and this can apply to any business really, you know, to go out there and find someone who believes in what you're doing and can help direct you, because creatives, a lot of their brain space is used to being creative. And
they probably undersell themselves a lot too, as far as how they price their creative.
Yes.
Think, oh, I don't, you know, oh, really, I shouldn't charge that much. Or you think, are you kidding me? This is amazing. You should be charging X, Y, Z. Why are you only charging this? Because they're so humble about, and they don't think that people are necessary. Like when you see people that, you know, that are doing great art or sculptures or whatever, often you think, and then you've got, on the other hand, somebody who puts out something that's just a blank canvas and says, give me $100,000 for that.
And someone will. It's all about market and market size. Yeah, someone will buy it.
Somebody will buy it. Exactly. I think the pricing side, I think, is one thing that new founders need to really think about, and it goes along with confidence as well, and believing in what you do, but never to undersell yourself. And always find when you're starting a new business, always find the midway point. You don't want to be the most expensive because you're not established yet. You don't want to be the cheapest, but it must be commercial. It must be to the point where whatever it is that you're selling, that you're going to make a profit and that you're going to be able to survive. And that's where your mentors and people who perhaps, you know, you can access to get advice about and run it past fresh eyes to say, you know, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm pricing, but people who have had that experience in that area, I think that's really important, because otherwise you could really undersell what you're doing.
We see small business people trying to buy market share and running at a conscious loss for a period of time to try and build markets. And what we're seeing now, which is obviously clearly a flawed methodology, is that the venture capitalists or the investors that are backing those businesses are now saying, your burn rate, sorry, no, I want you to turn a profit. But they've actually sold their souls in the process. And it's very challenging to flip those costs out when those costs are committed, often contractually. So there's that kind of flaw almost about, you know, we're talking about pricing your product, and I know in clothing, you know, it's critical to price things appropriately. You don't want to buy a market and then thinking you build loyalty and then you can double the price next year because you've built loyalty. No, people are fickle. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens. And it's back to what you were saying, Judith, about having the money ready to go. Fashion is one of those rather difficult businesses where it's in such cycles. So you have to produce a season's collections, which is, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of production to make those garments and then hope they sell. And so I often say fashion is such a difficult business in many ways, because it's really like starting a new business every collection, every 6 months. It's not like you've come up with one product. You know, I often joke and say, I wished I invented the Mars bar, because that's what I make every year, every season, every production run. It's the same. So with fashion, it's different every 6 months. And that's a scary thing, but it's also the exciting thing. And, you know, I love the fact that, you know, it is new every season. Well, I say it's new. It's got to be new. It's got to be different, but not too different. Because if you flip it too much, you lose your market. So it's got to be different enough. So that in itself is quite a challenge, to come up with collections, you know, a couple of times a year that are different, but won't scare anyone off.
Yeah, that are still on brand.
Yes,
but allow you to be creative and have another creative expression that's reflecting society or society's needs, or your customers' needs.
Yes, yes.
You've been listening to part 1 of our conversation with Lisa Barron. For more, please tune in to part 2. For more information about Every Step and our guests, head to everysteppodcast.com. To be notified of new podcasts, please subscribe via your favourite listening platform. And of course, follow us on social media and direct message us to share your ideas about guests or topics.